Hello for another Art Talk Tuesday. This is I think we're nearing our almost 30th one or something. Oh, we've done so many of these. Oh, this one I'm so excited because we have Rachel on. I'm so excited because I have been following Rachel on Instagram for a while. I'm not sure how I ended up on her profile, and I feel like that's how all the stories start, right? It's like, oh, I was following this person on Instagram, and then and then I asked him to be on. But really, anytime one of her bird paintings comes on my feed, I'm like, oh my gosh, she is so good. And she has her own certain kind of style, and it's just so cool. And I love how she's so niched. And so I want to talk to her a little bit about that, because I feel like it's almost restricting to me, maybe, I don't know, maybe to stay in one niche, because I wonder if she has people asking her for stuff other than birds and she's just not posting it, which would be smart because she wants people to ask her for birds. I don't know. I'm gonna ask her all these questions. She's so cool. I say that, I haven't even met her yet, but I just have a feeling. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure, so she's on the East Coast, which is why we're doing it at 7, a little bit earlier, because it gets kind of late when you're on the East Coast. And so yeah, I've got all my questions laid out. I just typed them out because even though I ask generally the same ones every time, I just like to have them right here. So yeah, we're just waiting for Rachel to hop on. Little announcements. Yeah, her bird paintings are the best, Nathan. I know. They're so good. It's just her play on light is so good. I'm like, that shadow looks like it's a real shadow, and just the way the light comes on her birds, I'm like, hi Thomas, I'm so glad you made it. We're doing it a little bit early, so I didn't know if you'd make it. Yeah, oh, hold on. Okay, she just tried to audio call me on Messenger, so I think maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect on here. Technical difficulties as always. Let's see. We are just waiting for her to hop on here. Yeah, what else? There's so much going on right now. Literally right behind you, right behind this camera right here, is a big pink lion that I've been working on. I'm so excited. It's I haven't done a rainbow animal in forever, and so I was like, I gotta get back to doing something I want to do, and that's a rainbow animal. I feel like I paint for everybody else all the time. Anyway, so I'm actually doing a tutorial over the whole thing. Oh, that's a little off. I'm looking at it now. I'm like, wait, is her head really like that? I don't know. Anyway, you just stare at your own painting too long. I'm doing a tutorial over it. If you guys would like to know how to paint eyes, ears, nose, mouth, fur of animals specifically, because that's what I do, let me know. Hit me up. I'll message you. Yeah, I do them I actually just got off a live in the advanced group, and yeah. So yeah, I've been doing tutorials in there, business tutorials, painting tutorials, literally anything I do lately. It's like, I'm gonna whip out my camera and tell people how I'm doing it for some reason. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. So Rachel just messaged me on Messenger. Actually, let me get my computer real quick. Oh, there we go. I see you. Got that. Connecting, we got it. Hello! Oh boy. For some reason, can you hear me? Shoot. I can't hear. Let's try it again. Can you hear? It's okay. I can't hear. Okay, no voice. Is it no voice on either end? Okay. I can't hear. Let me see. Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Let me know. I feel like that one commercial. Can you hear me now? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, these are the right ones. So we just lost voice. I couldn't hear you, Rachel. Um, okay. Thomas, can you please let me know if when she was on here, could you hear her and could you hear her only or could you hear me only? I don't know why it does this. Facebook is so the whole time I could hear you. Okay. So Rachel, we just couldn't hear you for some reason. I don't know why. Don't worry about it though. Don't stress out. We'll figure it out. This happens sometimes. It's just a weird. Okay. We'll figure it out. Just you. Okay, thanks guys. Thanks for letting us know. Rachel, if you can still hear me, we'll just try to hop back on. Let me see if I can add you again. Sometimes, let's see. It's, hmm. Nathan, yeah, it might be her settings or mic. I don't know. We'll get it figured out. No big deal. Just gonna sip my kombucha. Um, oh, here we go. Let's try it again. No big deal. It'll work eventually. Sometimes we have to do it a couple times, and then it's like, oh, I can hear you.
Hi. I
Hi.
can hear you. I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you before. Hopefully nobody heard my profanity.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, we couldn't hear you at all, but I'm so glad we can now. Sometimes it does that, like
Yes.
Facebook. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm glad we got it to work.
Yes. Yes, I'm here. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for coming on here and taking some time out of your night to come on here. I so
Yes,
appreciate
thank you
it.
for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm like, so excited to finally get to virtually meet you. I see your
Yes.
bird paintings come on my Instagram feed all the time, and every time, like I'll show my friend Emily, who I usually paint with too. I'm like, look at this, like this is so
Oh,
cool.
thank
I love it.
you. That's so sweet. I love your bathroom. I think I need to get that flamingo shower curtain.
I know, right? It's so
So
pink. I love
cute.
it. Okay, so if you could just maybe tell us a little bit of your backstory, like who you are, where you are. If somebody, I sent out like an email earlier of like just telling people like who you were, but if just somebody hasn't clicked on your profile yet, just kind of give us a little backstory of how you came to where you are.
Yeah. So I guess to go really far back, so I went to college for art. So I got my BFA in art studio. And then I stayed for a fifth year to get my master's in teaching because at that time I was like, well, I need to pay my bills. You
Yeah.
know, we all go through that. And so I moved back home. I went to college kind of far away. I moved back home and I was actually an art teacher for 5 years before I quit my job to do my art full time. So,
Wow.
yeah, so definitely I had an art background kind of going into it. So I think that helps. But, you know, I feel like I did my time for 5 years in the real world before I did this full time. So
Yeah.
that was how I got started.
Yeah, amazing. That's so cool. It's very similar. Like I went into art education as well, and I was about
Yeah.
to do it and I was like, no, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. And then it kind of worked out. But yeah, so I definitely get it though. I mean, being an art teacher, I mean, I'm sure it was fun, but maybe
Yeah.
not as fun as being a studio artist, I guess.
No, you know, it was a lot of fun. And I feel like if I was ever going to really be an art teacher, because, you know, I loved teaching and I don't want to like diss teaching. I just
Yeah,
feel like I
no.
was never meant to be like one of those people that lived, eat, and breathed curriculum and teaching. And I was going to do it for 30 plus years and that whole thing. It was like my heart, there was always a part of me that wasn't fully into it.
Yeah.
I always kind of identified more as an artist than a teacher. But, you know, I was at this really great high school. It was all girls. It was kind of a dream job and I loved it while I was there. I just felt like after 5 years, I had to follow my true passion. And yeah, I was like doing both things at 50%. So I felt like I had to pick one and kind
Yeah.
of just give it a try.
That's amazing. Yeah, and now how long has it been, you said?
So that was in about, I think that was like 2011 or 12, I want to say,
Wow.
that I quit teaching. Yeah. So it's been a while, but I mean, it's been a hustle for all those years for sure. Took a
Definitely.
while.
Yeah, and now you have that teaching behind your belt. You can always like teach classes later on if you want to, or or do you?
Yeah. Well, you know, teaching is, like you said, it's one of those things I can always go back to.
Yeah.
You know, I have my master's, and so, It's great. And every once in a while I'll teach lessons, and, if there are slow months, I have the option to go back and do that to kind of supplement my income. And so I take comfort in knowing that for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. Awesome. So what do you think was the turning point from like that took you from hobby to professional artist? So like was it just one school year you were like, okay, I'm not going back after the summer, or what was it?
Um, it was kind of a long time coming. I feel like after probably 3 years of teaching, I was really seriously considering making a break, and just quitting. But it took a couple years for me to feel comfortable in doing that. And so I would say I spent 2 years while I was teaching. I took on as many commissions as I possibly could. I was doing a lot of pet portraits at that time. And so but then I felt like after 5 years, I had that 2 year gap where I was doing both and I felt more comfortable. And so I felt like it was that 5 year mark that made me feel like it was either then or never. I felt like I was either going to quit then or I was going to be teaching for the next 20 plus years, which also would have been fine. I just felt like if I just had a feeling like it was the right time.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. I love to hear the behind the
Yeah.
scenes stuff. Okay, so
Yeah.
nowadays, now that you're not going to a classroom, what makes up your typical work day and how many hours do you spend painting a day usually?
Okay, so that was the hard part for me. I mean, I think when you go from, especially when you have a job like teaching where you literally have to be, where I was teaching, I was at work by probably 7:30, staying till 5. So it was like a very regimented schedule. So from that to me working for myself and having all this free time, was difficult. And so I feel like I set my day up exactly how I would if I had a job that I had to be somewhere at a certain time. So I'm an early bird, so I get up every morning, like by 6, probably 6:30.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I'm like usually painting no later than 8 a.m. and that would be a late day for me. And so, but I would like break for lunch, just like for an hour. I take my lunch break and then I get back to it. And then depending on the time of year, of course, the winter, I usually have to stop by like 4 at the latest. But so I would say in the wintertime, I probably paint from, um, you know, I probably paint maybe 6 hours a day. Whereas in the summer, I try to paint at least 8 hours a day, but that's sporadic, like going back and forth. And that's at least 3 to 4 days a week. That's not like every day.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, but for me, I think just to stay kind of organized, I have to have that regimented schedule or else I have that personality that if I have too much free time, it's easy for me to just kind of be lazy and not work. So that's what works for me. I have a lot of friends that do it differently, but for me in particular, that was important for me to maintain some sort of like sense of normalcy in my schedule to be productive.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. Like I have to, it's so much easier for me to get up in the morning and go to a painting job or do a painting thing. Because if I don't have somewhere I have to be, I'm like, I'll like hang out and like do this
Yes.
and so much
Oh, I'll
easier.
like drink coffee for 2 hours, catch
Yeah,
up on my shows. I'm like, oh my God, it's 10:30. I've done nothing. So
exactly.
yeah,
And then there's like
I,
guilt and then yeah.
yes, exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so you paint during the day. Do you, I think I maybe
Yes,
saw like a post that you did recently or something, but do you use daylight? Is that the reason you
I
do?
do. Yes. I like to paint, and that's why I try to get started as early as I can. It's because where my studio is right now, well, I'm currently painting out of my dining room. But so I get really, really great light in the morning, and so I feel like I'm the most productive between the hours of 7 and 10 for whatever reason. Those are like my 3 hours where I get the most done. I feel like I'm the most creative at that time. But yeah, so I always paint during the day, because I need the light to work. So
Yeah.
I wish I could get work done at night, but I just don't have the light to allow for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think our schedules are switched because like 7 to 10 p.m. are like my times to go.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, it's strange. I'll try to get going, I'll try it, and then like 7 o'clock, I'm like, I'm gonna get so much done.
Oh my gosh. I'm like in bed by, this is embarrassing, but like 9 o'clock, if not
Okay.
somewhat earlier. I'm like, for whatever reason, I've just never been a night owl. So
Yeah.
I try to get as much done during the day as I possibly can because at night my brain just kind of shuts off. So,
Kudos to you for being a morning person. I envy
well,
that. That's
kudos
so
to
cool.
you for being a night person. I
Yeah.
envy that.
Yeah.
like falling asleep. I'm like surprised I'm not falling asleep right
I
now.
know,
It's
I
not
know.
even that
It is.
late.
It kind
I'm an
of.
old lady really at heart.
That's funny. Can you talk us through your painting process? Like, are there any methods or techniques that you picked up through years of experience?
Yeah, mostly through college, I was a trained oil painter, and that's really all I worked with was oils. Of course, I worked with watercolors, but really, I never worked with acrylics at all. And I feel like that was a huge turning point for me because I kind of think that I'm self-taught in acrylic. I mean, I've had a little bit of experience and guidance, but for the most part, that was a medium that I really taught myself to use. And so as opposed to oil and watercolor and pottery and all this other stuff that I was taught all these ways to do things. And then I think because I hadn't had that, it allowed me to kind of make mistakes and organically come up with my own process. And so, I started working with acrylics and I haven't stopped since. And so that's a huge part of my process. And so the way I kind of work is I always work from a photograph. And I'll get a really kind of like light pencil sketch. I'll transfer that onto a canvas. And then I always do the background first, which is kind of reverse the way a lot of other artists work. And then I use the background color to kind of create a monochromatic painting, like an underpainting.
Yeah.
And then it's very much acrylic kind of has to be a wet on wet process. I mean, it dries so quickly, but I also feel like that's kind of become part of my technique is just loading on those layers while it's still wet. I work really, really quickly. And so for the first few hours of every painting for me is just very heavy, thick paint, wet on wet. And then usually I walk away from it and then let that dry for a while before I do any kind of detail work. So they're big brushes. Yeah, and that's kind of how I get started.
I love it. I love that. We're very similar in that. It's so like fulfilling almost being able to cover so much space in so little time too. I'm like, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, and it's great because, I'll kind of like work on a few things at a time, but it's nice because with oil, I was running into all these issues where it was just, it takes so long to dry. And I love oil paint, love, love, love oil. And I feel like at some point in my career, I'll get back to them. But I don't know, it was just like I needed a break or something and I needed to kind of try my own thing. And for whatever reason that works for me and it's working right now. And yeah, like you can just get a lot more done. You could definitely get a lot more done in a shorter amount of time. That's also a huge perk. So yeah.
Definitely. How long? Okay, so like how long did it take you average to do like one of your bird paintings?
It depends on the size, although I mean, for me anymore, I feel like a small piece takes almost as long as a large piece.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, the work and almost, especially when the initial sketch, the larger ones take no time, but it's
Hmm.
like those tiny ones that take forever. But I don't know. I would say, on average, 20 hours. Maybe less, maybe more,
Yeah.
depending on the size. Certainly not for a smaller piece. A smaller piece I can do probably in like 10 hours or less. But yeah, for like those larger pieces, which I feel like I've been doing more of, they're usually about 20 plus hours of work, give or take.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah. I
And
love the painting behind you right now, the elephant. He's so
thanks.
cool.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm just noticing him.
Yeah. Yeah, he was actually done with like really cheap craft paint. And so when people ask me like,
Nice.
yeah, because that's like one of the first ones I did before I like started investing in a lot of paint. And I'm like, you don't need crazy do you have a certain kind of brand or anything? Actually, I think that's maybe on here. And now it's on.
Yeah, I love Liquitex. I was using
Okay.
Liquitex. I kind of go back and forth. It depends. For an underpainting, I use Liquitex Basics, which are like those just cheap acrylics that you can buy, and they work because they're, a little bit more water-based, so they're more translucent. I can get a better underpainting, and then once I start to layer, I like a heavier bodied acrylic.
Hmm.
So for the most part, I've been using Liquitex as a brand, but like I don't use expensive brushes. And that's
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I don't know. I feel like my favorite brushes were all less than $10. I'm not even kidding. And so that's one thing where I'm like happy not to spend money on. But yeah, so that's what works for me right now.
I love it. Yes. And I feel like too, like I go through brushes like a lot. Sometimes I'll like accidentally leave them out or you'll get knocked out. And if it's like a $2 brush, I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yes. Well, and I beat up my brushes. I feel like I'm really rough with my brushes or
Yeah.
I'm like scrubbing into the canvas. And so I don't want to have to worry about like, oh, I have to be really careful with this one or, be really careful about cleaning this one because it was 20 or $30. For me, I've had just as okay of a time using inexpensive brushes.
Yeah.
So
It
it
works.
works.
As long as
Yeah,
the bristles don't fall out, it's fine.
exactly.
Yeah. What is the one thing you don't like to paint without?
Music or like background noise, I should say. So
Okay.
I go back and forth between like sometimes I'll leave the TV on or like a movie on, or I just like tune out because I need noise. Or right now I'm in more of a music stage, but I just cannot get any work done if it's dead silent. For whatever reason, I just can't focus.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to like audiobooks or podcasts or anything?
I don't, but I could see myself doing that maybe in the future for sure.
Yeah. I listen to music all the time, and then someone gave me like a really good Audible, and I was like, "Oh, this is it!" Like it's so because your
Yes,
mind just gets lost in something else, and it just makes me be able to paint longer when I'm not in
I
my head.
agree.
But yeah.
Yes, I totally agree.
Thomas asked, have either of you ever used gouache? Is that how you say that? Gouache? Yes,
Yes.
right?
I have. I'm not a huge fan, but I know a lot of people that love working with it. It's not really part of my process.
Yeah. I've never actually used them, so any recommendations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love watercolor. That's probably my second favorite. Right now I'm just really into these like water-based paints, but yeah, watercolor has always been a love of mine. I used to love working with watercolor in college, and I actually could see myself getting back into that at some point in the future for sure.
Yeah. So fun. Do you have a favorite? Actually, hold on. Are there any art lessons you've learned the hard way?
Oh, I mean, yes, for sure. Oh my God, I'm like, where do I start? I think it's just I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. Mostly, I feel like it's just really just with experimenting. I feel like when I was first kind of like teaching myself how to use acrylics, I went through just so many back and forths about like how much do I layer on and how much water do I add. And I think when you're getting to know a medium for the first time, you kind of go through that. I'm trying to think specifically lessons that I've learned. I think the biggest thing is just I used to paint with, I wouldn't really have a plan in mind. I would just be like, I'm going to paint today. And I would just like get started right away because I was just like really eager to get paint on the canvas. And I think the most important thing is just like to have somewhat of a plan before you get started.
Yeah.
I think that's more beneficial just as far as like placement. I mean, I've so many times in the past, I feel like I haven't taken into consideration, like the aesthetic of the piece, and I'm trimming canvases and restretching them. And so I don't do that as much anymore. But yeah, I think that's probably the best example I can think of. I'll think of like 10 more when we're
Right.
done, but
Yeah, I feel
you
like
know,
every time I ask that question, people are like, "Oh, which one? Like, which one do I
yes.
tell?"
Oh my gosh, it's just been so many for sure. But of course, we have to go through those things, I think, to
Yeah,
learn the right way. So,
for sure. Have you ever like had so like we teach a little bit of like painting techniques and we teach some business stuff in here too. Is
mhm.
there any like business thing that you've maybe learned the hard way on maybe like pricing or shipping or anything like that?
Mm, I'm trying to think. Probably, I think for me, like the hardest part about just as far as business with doing this as a career, the hardest thing for me, I think initially was figuring out like, what's my thing going to be? Like what's going to set me aside from everybody else? And I would say, I think to anybody getting started, instead of like those particular things, I think first and foremost, I think people have to decide what's going to make me different from everybody else. How am I going to stand out? So like I feel like I made a lot of mistakes when I was first getting started bringing my work to galleries, and I was showing work that they had seen before, like landscape or certain types of like cityscape paintings that I would do. And I wasn't as good as the people who were doing that at the time. And I was like, it wasn't even really what I loved. And so I guess if I had any kind of advice from a business standpoint, I would say just like stay true to yourself, as cliche as that sounds. I mean, it's so true. I mean, pick something that kind of sets you apart, but also stays true to what you love and what is symbolic to your style and, what you want to do. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best thing I can think of.
I love that.
Um,
That really hits home too. Because like a
yeah,
lot of people I have a couple people that I know too. They're like, well, I'll just stick with this because that's what I'm known for. I'm like, but you want to do this. Why don't you do it? And they're
right.
like, no. And even I like struggle with that a little bit too, just because like when I started doing rainbow animals, that's what I wanted to do for a long time. I just didn't do it. Like
Yeah.
and now like
Well,
right behind it's like I'm doing a pink lion right now, and I'm like that's the real me. And forever I like didn't do it because I was scared to do it.
yeah, it's like we fall into this, it's like a trap of like, what do I think people want to see? Or like,
Hmm.
what's going to get me into this gallery? What's going to get me into this show? Instead of thinking, okay, what do I actually really like to do? Because I think when you're painting something that you really love and that you're passionate about, ultimately other people become passionate about that. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I just think that's super important. I definitely agree with you there. I'm happy to know that you're doing that for yourself now
Yeah.
and you're doing what you really love and having success. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's so fun. Like, okay, how did you get into the birds then? Okay, well, how did that come out? I love them, all of them. I love that you
Thank
name
you.
them too. I love that. I'm like, oh man, maybe I should name my animals. I don't know, but how did
You
you?
should.
Yeah.
Um, so when I was teaching, I was doing a lot of commission work, and most of that work I was doing pet portraits for people.
Hmm.
And and what I loved about pet portraits was when you're painting somebody's pet, ultimately the goal is to bring their personality to life. And so that was the fun part to me. And of course, I loved the texture and I love animals and all that stuff. And then simultaneously, I was also painting these like bird silhouettes on reclaimed barnwood for a local business. And so it was honestly the marriage of both of those things, because as much as I love animals, I love birds. And so I had this idea, what if I were to do birds in portrait style? That kind of do the same thing as the pet portraits I was painting, like bringing out their personalities, because birds have such different personalities. And so I decided one day to paint one, and I brought it to a local gallery, literally like less than a mile from my house. And she took it and she sold it in a couple weeks. And I think that gave me the confidence to pursue that, was the sale for sure.
Yeah.
Because, I took it in and I was like, I don't know if she's going to even like this or if anybody's going to, identify with this at all. But the fact that it sold, I was like, wow, somebody paid their own money for this. So maybe I should do more. And I mean, that was where it all started. And then just really took off from there. And it's been an evolution for sure.
That's amazing. How many birds do you think you've done? If you just had to
Oh
guess.
my gosh. It's so funny. I was thinking about that the other day. I think it's probably been, it has to be over 100 at this point.
Wow.
Totally over. It's got to be at least 50 owls. And it's got to be, I mean, I should count. That's a good question. If I had to guess, it's over 100 easily.
So cool. I love that you're so niched down because they say like what's the thing that the riches are in the niches thing, and I think that's
Yeah.
just the marketing of like when somebody sees the same thing over again, it like really gets in their head and they want that. And like because like with your birds, I went from like even just the marketing standpoint of it, I was like, oh, that's really pretty, and then just seeing it over and over, I'm like, okay, I want it. Like, and so that's the power of a niche, and you're
Yeah.
sticking to it. I just think that's a great example of that. Do you? So you don't get tired of it. You're not ready to switch out. Do you think you ever will, or?
I'm not tired of it. I think initially, like I was saying before, and especially I should add, I live in a very like art focused area. So I live probably less than 10 minutes from Andrew Wyeth's home studio in this little town in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. It's not far from Philadelphia. So I feel like there's this enormous art community. So that was also part of why I was a little bit nervous to pursue it full time, because there was so much local talent. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to fit into this art community? Am I good enough? The whole thing. And like you said, this was like my little niche, and this was like my way in. And so the past year or so, I've been contemplating kind of getting into some other animals. I think I'm definitely always going to paint birds for sure, but I would love to get into just kind of like playing around with some other textures, because that's also become such a big part of my work, is like, just like creating texture with brushstroke. And I think, I'm ready to maybe try that with something other than feathers. But yeah, that's definitely in my planner for next year, to get some new animal portraits done for sure.
I love it. Yes, I love your texture. I look at it sometimes and I'm like, okay, how does that okay, do you so you use your paintbrush and you put it down there and then like how do you create that? Because it is a different kind of texture, but it's so cool looking.
And that's where I was able to, I kind of figured that out almost by accident. I was having a really bad month a few years ago, and it was still like very early stages within the first couple years of me doing this full time. And my early work, when I look back at it, it has almost no texture, which is so funny to me now, because I look back, I'm like, my gosh, I can't believe I used to paint like that. I was like so focused on just copying what I saw. Like I always work from a photograph. And so to me, I felt like, it was like photorealism for sure. And instead of me trying to think of how to create texture on my own, I was just like using really small brushes and really trying to just copy the photograph ultimately. And one day I just got really sick of it. I was like, I have headaches every day. I'm like beating up these small brushes. And so I just had a day where I was like, I'm doing a crappy painting today. And I didn't use any small brushes, and I just started like loading the paint on the canvas. And after a few hours, I was like, I think I might have something here. It was like it was one of those things where I feel like we all also go through, like, you're doing a piece and you're like, this is either going to be amazing or it sucks. You know what I mean? Like, it was not anything in between. And so I was like loading it on, and then I walked away from it. And the next day I went back to it, did a little bit of detail. And that piece was a major turning point for me, because it was the most interesting piece I had ever painted, in my opinion. And I was like, I'm never going back to the detail brushes. I'm never going back to that way. And so that was really how I figured out how to do that. And more over the past few years, it's become really just about letting my brush do the work for me. And I think with acrylics especially, you have more of the ability to do that in that technique, because it's the dry time, and you can really get them watered down, and they're more translucent. And so I don't know if I were to go back to oil, if that would work. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it's just a wet on wet, and you literally take a lot of paint on a big brush, and you just it's like a lot of pressure that you put down, and then kind of like lighten up on the pressure. So they're just like really just individual swipes. I know that sounds crazy, but it's just about letting the brush do the work ultimately.
Yes, I love it. It's so different is why I love it. I'm just like, it makes you like look at it just a bit more. And it's like, because like I think it's a little bit more interesting than realism. It's like a little bit more artsy to it, because like a lot of people can paint it as it is, but it takes something to like be like just have your own style like that. But I love it.
Yeah. Well, I felt like I was ready for that. I was like, I was bored of my work, like after the first couple years, I felt like I was capable of a little bit more. And I think even now, I think I'm capable of more. So it's like, I try to push myself, because I think I can do it, but it's just, I think we all go through that as artists. I think it's just having the confidence to actually try it and set the time aside to do crappy work. Like, set a few days aside and make peace with the fact that like you might do really crappy work. And I think every once in a while, who knows what might happen, but that's what worked for me. So
Yeah, I
who knows?
totally get it. Like just with this line right here, I'm like looking at it right now. It's right over here. I was like, I wanted to do
Oh,
like pastel pink, and usually I'm like high contrast and it's easy and I know how to do that. And I'm like, okay, this time I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna use
yes.
black in this. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be fine. And I'm like,
I
okay, it's
know.
working out. Okay, everything's fine.
You have to like give yourself a pep talk. You're like, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah. I was like, if it goes bad, I can just add black later or something.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Rachel just commented, she's from New York City, and she was like, I love your bird paintings, they're so beautiful. But yeah, she's from
Oh,
New York
thank
City,
you.
so she knows what it's like to be in this oversaturated market as well. And I think you're
Yes.
a great example of niching down and really just making it your own.
Oh, thank you.
Mary has a comment on here. I too paint lots of birds and really love your style. I'm too detailed and struggle to get away from that. Yeah.
Oh, Mary, we've all been through it. I just think I think you just have to try. Mary, do a crappy painting. It's
Yeah.
okay. Do
Yeah.
a crappy painting and use like thicker paint, use a big brush. No, I mean, in all seriousness, approach a painting in a way that makes you feel comfortable. But throw your like small brushes away. Like buy 3 different brushes that you've never used before. I mean, like a couple years ago, I bought a filbert brush for the first time, and I have no idea why, but now it's one of my favorite brushes. And so I think even just, making some little changes and trying new things can make all the difference for sure. So
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I love it. Do you have a favorite past project? Is it an owl?
yes.
Okay.
So for sure, my favorite owl is, it was an owl that I painted, the piece that was the turning point for me. And I'll be happy to post that in the group.
Yeah.
He's just small. He was a little 9x12, but yeah, I'll share that one later. He was a little barn owl. Big surprise there.
Yeah, I love it though. I love when
It's like my favorite.
Yes, I love when you're trying new things and you kind of find that thing you really love. Like mine are big cats. I'm just kind of coming into it. And I'm like, okay, that makes me way happier than painting a bear or something,
I know. Well, and when you're happy about it, other people get excited. I think it translates. If you're doing work that you're not super thrilled about, even if you try to fake it, I think people still pick up on it.
Yeah, for sure. Mary says, thank you. She's going to try with the brushes. And Rachel says, I agree. I made a crappy painting and it is one of my favorites. Awesome.
See, it's when the magic happens.
What are your future art plans and goals? What are you working on right now?
Oh, my future plans. Right now, I'm trying to get my Etsy page back up and running. I opened up an Etsy shop a few years ago and had no idea how much work it would be. And so unfortunately I shut it down. And then I hired a friend of mine to run that page for me. And so we've kind of just been working on it. It's been our baby for a few months. And so I have prints available, but I'm hoping to also start offering some unframed originals. And I felt like this past year, I really overloaded myself and I did a lot of shows, which was great. But I feel like it didn't leave me much time to connect with, like, I have such a great following on Instagram and I've really met a lot of great people and collectors. And I feel like I kind of let people down just because I didn't have enough inventory to offer people. And so I'm hoping that through the Etsy page, I can have these smaller pieces. And I can mark them down a little bit because they're coming from me. And so, and they're unframed. And so that's kind of just like my passion project right now. And I'm excited about that.
That's amazing. Not having enough inventory is a good problem, though, I guess.
It's a good problem to have. Yeah, it's not a bad problem.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. You have collectors. So you do primarily shows. So that's how you kind of get your name out?
Yes, that's kind of been my business model for the past 3 years. I show mostly at local galleries. I'm at a few galleries, I'm in two galleries in Colorado, and which is probably the farthest one away. And then I'm in another gallery up in Maine. But for the most part, I make most of my income from local shows that I participate in throughout the Philadelphia area. And they're usually like every month or so. And I'm lucky that I have the opportunity to do those because I know that's like so rare. I mean, but I think last year it was great. I think I just overloaded myself with that. So, but for the most part, that's how I've been able to make most of my money since I've started doing this full time.
Awesome. You inspire me to go out and do like art shows more. I've never really done one. Like Springfield isn't like where I am. It's in the Midwest, isn't really an art buying community, but I could travel and do them. So.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Okay, you've inspired me. Are there or is there any advice you would give artists who want to make art their full-time career but just don't know where to start?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think the most important thing is to come up with a plan. I mean, I think for me, that came after year 3 of, I'm like, when I was like working in the real world, not that I'm not doing that now, but my plan after year 3 while I was teaching was that like, hopefully by year 5 that I would be able to quit. And so, fortunately I am married. And so I think it softened the blow for a little because, I have a husband who works. And so, but whatever your situation is, I think be prepared to, figure out your financials, plan ahead, start like, put some money away so that if you do just make a clean break, you can at least survive for however long, set a goal for yourself after this many months. Then if it's not working out, maybe I'll go back to work part-time. But I think the most important thing is to just have a plan for yourself, because ultimately I know that we all would love to be able to do this full time, but we also have to pay bills, and that's the reality of the world. So I think having a plan is the very first thing that anybody should do before they decide to do this as a full-time career. Because also, as you know, Andrea, it is not easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
come up with a plan.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
For sure. Strategy. That's what I'm always saying too. I'm like, treat your art business like a business, not a hobby. Like, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Take a lunch break for an hour, get up, make a schedule for yourself, treat it like it's a 9 to 5. Seriously. I mean, that's what works for me. So,
yes.
yeah.
I love that you say that too. Yeah, you are living the dream too. Like I love that
Oh,
you're painting stuff.
trying to.
I know it just sometimes we have to like step back and be like, okay, yeah, like this is pretty cool. Even though it's stressful, like, but like
Yeah.
there are several aspiring artists in here that are like on the verge of maybe making that transition. And so I think you're just a shining example of someone who's doing it and also very honest about what it takes. And I love that you just shared that and everything. So
Oh my gosh, you as well. It's so amazing what you're doing. I'm so inspired by you. My goodness. I wish,
thanks.
seriously, and advice would be to follow chats like this. I mean, if I had
Yeah.
known there was a group like this back when I was getting started, I was just telling a friend of mine today about this thing I was doing tonight. I said, if I had known about this years ago, I'm like, this would have been great. I had none of this. So I think it's awesome
Exactly.
what you're doing. So
Thanks.
thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah. And I started this because of that. And I have like a paid membership group to where I give them my like invoice templates and proposal
Yeah,
templates. I'm like, here, let me help you. Like, spread your wings. Like,
that's
and
amazing.
yeah. Um, but yeah, it was so nice. And I love starting this because I get to
Yeah,
meet like famous
I know.
Instagrammers like you, and I love
Oh,
it.
it's so nice to meet you finally. And thank you for the print. Oh my God, I'm obsessed
Yeah.
with your bathroom. I'm
Thanks.
getting
Yeah.
that flamingo shower curtain for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for coming on, and I'm sure I'll see you
Yes,
on Instagram, and we'll be commenting on on each other's stuff for a long time. But I'm so glad I
I
got
look
to meet you.
forward to it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Seriously, this was so fun. Thank you.
Yep. See ya. Have a good night.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
Andrea.